Good evening and welcome everyone to the 2025-2026 Family Education Night Series sponsored by Northstar. Northstar is devoted to providing career opportunities and academic excellence for people with all different kinds of challenges and building communities where people of all abilities thrive. This evening, we are starting our series with two wonderful speakers, so thank you both for being here. My name is Holly Peel, and I'm the director of Northstar Career Center. Here with us, we have Carol Brown, our representative from the Department of Aging and Rehabilitative Services, and Kathy Matthews is sharing her expertise from All Needs Planning. So we have a packed agenda tonight. Without further ado, we can go ahead and get started. And I will ask Ms. Brown if she can please tell us all about what the Department of Aging and Rehab Services does and how that pertains to the transition to adulthood. Thank you both so much for being here.
Thanks for having us, Ms. Peel. Thank you to all of Northstar. I'm happy to join you again. So I'm Carol Brown, the vocational rehabilitation counselor from DARS that serves Northstar. And this is going to be an overview of what we're providing students now and then the services we have after graduation. So what is DARS? We're the Virginia Department of Aging and Rehabilitative Services. We're in the rehabilitative side of things. We provide the federally mandated vocational rehabilitation program. And that's to assist individuals who have disabilities prepare for working, enter the workplace if they need support on the job. Our focus is employment. We're not the service you would use if you need community engagement. We need any service we provide, I need to show that it's going to lead to work. And participation is voluntary. No one has to work with us, but also if more so when you're on the adult side, if you don't remain engaged, you end up with your case closed. So we work closely with schools. We both have the goal to get students ready for work. We understand that students with disabilities have not had the opportunities to prepare for work traditionally that other students have. They're less likely to have had a part-time job or just, babysitting around the neighborhood or mowing lawns. And we want to close that gap. So we're mandated to work together. I think we actually like working together. And my goal is to come in and enhance what the school is doing. I don't come in with my own transition agenda and kind of override anything that's happening. I learn what each school is doing with each student and try to adjust my services for everyone's needs. So what are PREETs? So it's pre-employment transition services. So we are looking at job exploration and work readiness skills and kind of informed choice of what's happening next. It's just for students with disabilities. It says here you do not have to be a DARS client, which is a little confusing. Later we'll talk about the process to become a vocational rehabilitation client, a VR client, because you will sign a form, we will open a case. You're just not, we're not going through the big process that we'll go over later. And PREET is for students who are between 14 and 22. Here's 3 sentences that basically say you have a disability. So working with exceptional ed and having an IEP, having a 504 plan, or having a disability where you're not necessarily getting services at school, but you have documentation for it. Once someone is out of high school, if they go to post-secondary, they can keep their PREET's case open. A lot of people choose to open a VR case because we can provide more services, but we can provide those PREET services up until 22 or exit from school. So there's an overlap with our services. How are students referred for PREETs? For your Northstar students, you're going to be going through your case manager or Ms. Peel. We have a referral form. It's a release and a consent form. I need that and documentation, which is usually the IEP or whatever other documentation you might have. For other schools, it's typically through the case manager or guidance counselor. If you're not a Northstar student, you'd want to connect with your case manager. If they don't know, the head of exceptional ed should be able to tell you how to connect with us. Worst comes to worst, call the office. We'll figure it out. So we have 5 required pre-EDS activities. They're listed here, but I'm going to click on to where we actually describe what each of them are. So first is job exploration counseling. We want our students to know what's out there, to understand how what they're interested in, what they're good at might transfer into the workplace. It's a chance to investigate careers, looking at labor markets, looking at what kind of education you need, looking at like the soft skills that you might need for that particular job, just to really understand what's out there. Mentions on the slide, informed decision making. We really want that informed choice to come in all elements of this process. Work-based learning experiences, getting a chance to either talk to the people who are hiring or working in the field already, or actually going to the site. We've had group tours through businesses. We can sometimes, well, not sometimes, we'll connect students with a job coach to go to, we usually do about 3 job sites to see what the environment's really like. They might get a chance to perform some of the job duties. Talk to the people who work there, understanding the expectations, to get that job. What might be a good first job to lead to this job? What kind of training do you get beforehand? I always like to use people who are interested in working with animals as an example, because often we do this work-based learning experience and they'll go, to a pet store or the SPCA and really get to work with animals and realize, I just want to hang out with my dog. I don't want to clean up after all these giant barking dogs. And of course, people might find out that's exactly what they want to do. It goes into that informed choice, getting a good idea of what's out there. Counseling on opportunities for enrolling in post-secondary education. So if I've met with your student and they've had an interesting job that we don't hear much of, I guarantee you, we've popped open ONET, which is a website that's run by, what is it run by? The U.S. Department of Labor, and seeing where that training is, what colleges might provide that major. We'll talk about what you might need to apply to that college, what are the expectations. And then, of course, there's plenty of opportunities that aren't college for training. We want to make sure that if we've identified an interest, we know that pathway to it. And then workplace readiness training. These are all the soft skills that you're going to need at any job. They have on here like employer expectations. I like to focus on workplace communication skills. There's things that won't get you kicked out of school, but will get you fired. Knowing how to communicate, and how to get a job, how to interview, fill out an application, all those things that we know by heart when we're a little older, but, like don't put your mom down as your reference, things like that. Instructions in self-advocacy. If our students need accommodations on the job, we want them to know how to get them, how to ask, what kind of information they might need to provide. And if they're interested in a training program or college, identifying the Department for Disability or accommodations at that school, seeing what kind of paperwork they might need to get the accommodations, and talking about how getting accommodations as an adult looks a lot different than in school. This says pre-employment transition services are the first step on a continuum of VR services provided by DARS, which, it is a continuum. It's not a required first step. If someone hasn't received pre-EDS, they can still pop in with VR, but it is, on that side of the continuum where we're starting out.
Carol, I'm sorry to pop in. It looks like the slides aren't advancing. Would you mind just scrolling through? I think it's not in the slideshow format, so if we just scroll down, we'll be able to all see all the different slides.
Are you seeing it now?
No, try Alt-Tab and see if that will advance them. The slideshow version, it's the editing. There you go. Thank
okay.
You. Yep, there you go.
Oh, so you were all on the same slide the whole time?
Yes.
I'm so sorry.
No, that's okay. It's good information.
Here they are really quick.
Thank you so much.
I would jump, but I guess if you're listening to the recording, you can pause. This is what I was talking about. There are all these great pictures too. All right. So we've gone here. So continuum. Next slide, what happens if you no longer want or need or qualify for PREITs? You can open a VR, a vocational rehabilitation case with us, and we're going to talk about that in a little more detail. Me and Ms. Peel like to work together when we know people are going to be exiting to have people open before they graduate. So we have that plan in place. It kind of matches what you've been doing in school. And of course, you're not obligated to use our services. We have plenty of students who go on their own to work and don't need our support. What's important is that you don't need to sign up right out of high school. If you're like, oh, let me give this a try, it's not working, you can just get in touch and open a case. So PREITs is all about getting that early start, getting an idea of what you're working towards, making sure you have information and knowing how to access information to make informed choice. VR is much more individualized and much more intensive. So it says here, we're here to help you prepare for, find, maintain competitive integrated employment. Prepare for could be training, finding might be working with a job coach, and might be connecting with our job placement. Maintaining could be help training on the job. It could be getting the accommodations you need, assistive tech you need. And a person doesn't have to come to us at the prepare for stage. You might be prepared, you just need help finding. You might be employed already, but you need some accommodations to keep your job or to advance in your job. So before we can do those vocational rehabilitation, the VR services, you first become a VR consumer. So the eligibility criteria is having a physical, mental, or emotional disability that results in a barrier to work, that you want to work with us, you think it would be helpful, and living in Virginia, eligible to work in the U.S. If you're in another state, there is the DARS version there. Oh, this is just some of the examples of things we can do. Everyone's going to get counseling and guidance. We're going to counsel and guide you no matter what. If someone's not sure what they want to do, we might start with vocational evaluations or working with a job coach for situational assessments, similar to those work-based learning experiences where you're going out to job sites and really seeing what's happening. Some people we connect with job coaches. Some people we're helping with training. It depends on the job goal and that individual's needs. For VR services, the core services are free. If we're doing an assessment, if you're working with our job evaluators or with a job coach to see if something's a good fit, there's going to be no cost. If you're working with a job coach, there's going to be no cost. Some of the other services like paying for training, buying equipment, we will do a financial participation spreadsheet we have to fill out. And it's based on that person's taxes for the past year or the taxes they were claimed on for the past year. However, if the person getting services receives Social Security, or if the household has TANF, general relief, that shows me I get to pay for everything. So if you're a student, I don't care if you just get $12 from Social Security, that shows me I can pay. It says we use comparable benefits. If the insurance is going to pay for something, if there's a free service out there, and with training, we definitely want you to fill out the FAFSA, because if there's a grant or scholarship, we want you to take that before we use our funds. We would not consider a loan. Going in debt is not a comparable benefit. So the process for VR, you referred for services, and that can be, you can be a self-referral. You can call us up, open a case. Initial visit, our first intake, where we talk about your goals, the accommodations you might need, your disability, how it affects your ability to work, your school level, all the information we would need to figure out your plan. Next is the eligibility determination. People either provide records or give me an authorization to get records that show disability. And from those records, I'm going to pull out those barriers to employment. It's going to show that you need the services, and it's going to help guide the individual plan for employment, so we know we're addressing those barriers. So after I do that, we'll meet again and develop an individual plan for employment, much shorter than an IEP. It will have a plan goal, So we have one job that we're working for and the services we need to achieve that goal. And then we jump in, whether that's going into training, connecting with the job coach. Again, really individualized. No one has the same route. After find a job and are stable on the job, we will close your case. But I want to clarify. So it's when you're stable on a job for 90 days. If you have not needed a job coach, if you're working independently, with no more supports from me, after 90 days, I'll call up. If you agree that you're ready to close the case and I agree things are going well, we'll close it. If you're working with a job coach, it's either going to be when you go to follow along services, when that job coach, instead of being there for every shift, is just checking in once or twice a month. Those follow along services are paid from another little pot of money, so I can close your case. And the other thing that might happen working with a job coach is if you need more intensive services, you're going to need a job coach there more than checking in once or twice. That's when Medicaid waiver will come in, because they also provide supports for employment. All the waivers do, all 3 waivers. So I'm going to be paying for those first 90 days, and then Medicaid waiver will start paying for that job coach. And there's some beautiful behind the scenes. You won't have any paperwork for that. I won't have any paperwork for that. They'll just make it happen. Once your case is closed, you can always come and open a case again. There's not a limit to how many times. If you're coming back every year, we're going to talk about that. But, if you come to me, if we open a VR case right out of high school, you get a job, you work it for 2 or 3 years, and you're like, I'm ready for training, and there's something else I want to do. Come back. Maybe we can help with that training. Maybe you can connect with a job coach. You don't need to be unemployed to come to us. Just ready for a change. And also, if you're in danger of losing your job, or getting advancement and needing our services, come on back. And we have a QR code for you with our PREETS and VR transition services webpage. There's another QR code after this, but the link for that website is in this page. So I'm going to hold it on here. So if anyone wants to grab this, they can. And I appreciate everyone's time, and perhaps we'll have some questions later.
We've got great questions in the chat. I'm very excited to see so many people chiming in. This is wonderful. I also had some points that I wanted to emphasize, knowing our Northstar audience. So we always talk about eligibility by having an IEP, but we have a lot of folks here who are placed by their families, so they don't have an IEP. And for the purposes of DARS, an IAP, which is just what it's called when you're a private school student, exact same thing. So no worries about the difference there. You are fine. Now we've got some great questions. One person said, does IPE stand for Individualized Plan for Employment? You get a gold star. That's exactly what it stands for. So way to go with your acronyms. Yes. And then someone else asked, can you give an example of how DARS helps people with emotional disabilities?
Oh, that's a great question. We have a new service we're utilizing called iSocial, which will connect a group of people who are neurodiverse, and they're including in their emotional disabilities. It's virtual, so they really like to customize group. And you learn those social skills that might help you on the job. If there's other supports we can provide or accommodations to help with emotional regulation. I had someone who was working with a cubicle with her back to the cubicle, and her boss would just walk in on her. So getting an accommodation of being able to go to a room and close the door, or at least being able to turn the computer so no one's jumping out at you. And again, it's really individualized. We're going to look at where the barrier is with that emotional disability, and what we need to do to address it. There's no accommodation, though, for insulting people, throwing things. That's something we'd have to address in a different way.
Great. Here's a good one. What about someone who has a disability but doesn't agree with the diagnosis? What's the way forward there?
Oh,
it's a good one.
If you want our services, and can identify a barrier. I'm trying to think of a good example of this.
So, for example, we have a few students now who identify as neurodiverse. They carry a medical diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder, but they disagree that it is a disorder. Rather, it's a feature of how their brain functions. But we live in a world where these things are regulated
Yes.
by different words. Sometimes I explain it by saying we have to navigate the landscape we have individually, but then, and this is what we're learning tonight, is how to navigate that individually. But then we can all work together to change the landscape, right? So maybe 15 years from now, we won't be talking about things as disorders. Maybe we'll be embracing neurodiversity in a different way.
And when I subscribe to the social model for disability, so if someone has a diagnosis of autism and the impairment maybe is related to communication, the disabling factor is not having autism. It is the expectation that everyone make eye contact a certain way or engage in small talk. So that's a disabling factor. That's what I want to address. If the diagnosis doesn't suit you, but will help us identify this disability, this disabling factor, I should say, I would say let's use it. If there's some other documented thing we can utilize to address the barrier, whatever the person's comfortable with, I'm going to be doing.
Yeah, that's a good one. I think we really need to wrestle with that question. In the short term, we've got to use the tools we have and look further down the road at building more tools for the people who come next. Great question. Are PREETs and VR services the same? And if not, is there a visual you have that can show how they're different? I can answer part of that. There is a visual available on our Family Education Night webpage that breaks things down a little bit. Also, we can talk through what that looks like for your Northstar student. But Carol, I'm going to defer to you for the broader question.
I tried to have AI make me a good visual, and it did not, because insert comment about AI here. Basically, PREETs, students between 14 and 21. VR services, it can involve students, but it's adults. PREET services, you're learning about work. VR services, you have identified the job that you want to get. We're providing services to achieve that goal. PREETs, if you have an IEP, IAP, 504 plan, or any documentation of disability, I'll be like, and you sign that form, I'm going to be like, awesome, we'll open you up and start doing some PREET services. VR services, we're going to go through that longer eligibility process where I'm pouring over your records. And VR services are more intensive, they're more individualized, it's on that specific job goal. We're working towards employment, we're closing over employment after employment. PREETs, we're learning, as long as you're a student, you can keep the case open, even if you start working somewhere. It's more an introduction to the world of work. And that would be great to have a visual. Because I don't think that quite cuts it. Huh?
Right. And one shorter way of thinking about it is pre-employment transition services target teens and young adults who are not quite entering the workforce, whereas vocational rehabilitation services are adults who are entering and in the workforce. And I think in that explanation, thank you, Carol, because you addressed the next question, which is what about a person who's homeschooled and has no IEP or IAP? But what you're really looking for is some documentation of disability.
Yeah.
So it can be medical documentation, it can be any kind of documentation that is covered by the Rehabilitation Act would be acceptable. Also, in terms of the timeline, I appreciated the overview, but because we have 3 dates coming up when all of our exiting students will be going through a part of this process, I just want to underscore some of the things that you said. So we start in PREETs, right? And typically, You would just fill out that referral form. If you're a Northstar person, you send that form to me, or you ask me for the form to begin with, and I send it off to Carol with a copy of the IAP or IEP. And then when you're coming close to exit, that's when we go through that VR step. So we're going to have an eligibility meeting. Those meetings can be kind of long because we're really doing a deeper dive. And Carol, you said, can you tell me again the window that DARS has to set up the eligibility? Is it 90 days?
Yes.
And then once you have the eligibility meeting, there's another window of time to write that individualized plan for employment, the IPE, and that window is
60 days.
60 days. So that's a total of 5 months that it could take to transition from pre-ETS to VR services, which is why we want you to start early in your senior year or your year of exit to get that ball rolling, so that when you exit school and you're no longer a student, you've got those services in place and you're hooked up with whatever services or vendor or next steps are going to be a part of that IPE. Let's see. Someone says, how has the federal government shutdown affected DARS, and will it continue to?
We have not had anything affected yet, and I've not heard about how it might in the future. I do have my fingers crossed.
Right. And is that because DARS is primarily a state agency that's governed by federal law and regulated, and maybe
and get a significant amount of funds from the federal government? So yeah, hopefully we'll be here.
Yes, fingers crossed. Ooh, another good one. Is there an age limit for an adult to open a VR case?
Absolutely not. And again, like if I worked with you when you're 19 coming out of school and you're 70, it won't be me. I won't be around. Yeah, there's no age limit. And then we work with all sorts of disabilities. Northstar, it's people who perhaps have been dealing with disabilities since birth. There are acquired disabilities. So if someone's listening to this and they weren't a student with an IEP, but when they were an adult, they experienced something that resulted in those disabling barriers to work, you can come to us.
Here's another great one. Can you give examples of the kinds of jobs that Northstar students have been placed in or found with DARS help?
Oh, now I have to file my students like who attended Northstar.
And I can give a couple of Northstar specific students, but I'll bet if you've worked with anyone from your experience in working with schools, those would be relevant.
Yes.
So we've had students work as, got a couple working as kennel attendants, and we had two students who went and worked for a firm that was selling vehicles online, and they did a lot of quality control for what was happening on the online website on the back end. We have a student who, actually we have two students who got paid internships at the Federal Reserve Bank. Those are the three off the top of my head. So I'll let you speak further.
I'm thinking of working for a company that creates t-shirts and other swag. Childcare jobs. I'm trying to think of any students who moved to IT.
I've got 4 alums who worked at Lowe's, 2 of whom moved into long-term positions after their initial seasonal position stopped. Had students at Einstein's Bagels, at Noodles and Company, Performance Food Group. In fact, we have 2 students, one at Noodles and one in Performance Food Group, who graduated the same year and who just celebrated their 5th anniversaries of their jobs. So that was very exciting. Trolley House Warehouse has been a great partner. So there's a lot of different opportunities, and they also change year to year. The YMCA has been a great employer as well. Does DARS help students in the jobs of their choice, or are there only certain companies that will accept DARS students?
So when you open with pre-ets, we're doing more general stuff. We're going to try to, if we do a work experience or work-based learning, have that be dedicated, that work-based learning be dedicated to what you're interested in. When you're open in a VR case, if your job goal matches your interests, your abilities, if it's the job market, I think there's some things that you might have to move to New York or Los Angeles to do. But if the local job market is good, we can show you can do the training or the job, then that's your job goal. That's what we're going to work towards. While there's some good companies that have been great partners for us, we will work with anyone.
Thank you all so much for all your engagement, and thank you for that rich information. I really appreciate it. And everyone keep the questions coming. Kathy, if you are on deck, we can go ahead and transition a little bit to presenting some more of this information. And for those of you who are popping questions in the chat, please continue, and we will circle back to them at the end if we don't get to them sooner. Thank you so much.
Yeah, hey, thanks. I always appreciate listening to that as well. It's very helpful. So I'm Kathy. I'm from All Needs Planning. We do special needs planning. So we're here to help families and individuals with the money stuff, the legal decision support and estate planning, as well as advocacy. So we help folks to get services such as DARS or Waivers, Social Security. So I'm here to really pick up a little bit on, I love where Carol just said in one of the last few slides that as DARS is working with an individual and when that runs out or, toward at the end of that Medicaid waiver, which is something I'll talk about today, is a service that could pick up job support. So we'll talk a little bit about that tonight. So that's how this kind of fits in. And I always just like to say I'm here because I'm a parent and a professional, although my kiddos are a couple years older than they see here. We're just on a mission, all of us at All Needs Planning as parents to not only do and know all of this for all of you and make sure we're spreading that information, but at home we all have kiddos that we're also worried about because they too have disabilities. And just to put it a little bit in perspective, when we're thinking about life stage, so everything we're really talking about tonight is that transition schooling period, which on here is stage 2 to 3. So there's that nice support that we see during the schooling years through the school system, and the fact that Northstar has the relationship with Carol to provide the pre-ETS employment support and training. And then as we move into that stage 3, which is really our adulthood till when our parents or caregivers retire, that's the point where we're really starting to contact and experience that adulthood, that independent living, that working to cover our own expenses. So there's quite a bit to do. So I'm going to talk a little bit tonight about some things to keep in mind as you're planning on all of that. So one of the reasons why we exist as a company is because most family members are actually providing care to a person with a disability. About 70% of the care is unpaid care from a family member. And again, as a parent myself, of course, I'm going to provide care to my loved one. But all the things we're talking about with employment support, training, getting started early, plugging in to support such as DARS, Medicaid waiver, and others is really about getting into a position where we're bringing in supports outside of that family that can help someone be as independent as possible and live the life that they want to live. I'm coming at this, and I think it's good to think about a care, protect, grow perspective. And what that means is that in the care phase, we're talking about all the things that we have to do to support our loved one. Protect is all the things we do to help ensure the things that we put into place stay for their lifetime. And then grow is where we're in a position where we're starting to feel a little bit relaxed, like we have things set up. So certainly thinking about employment and independent living and the funding that we're going to need by way of working is a part of really that care feature and feeling settled and sorted and ready with a strong foundation to go forward. So I want to talk about Medicaid waivers because they can play a role in employment support. Again, DARS is really going to be the recognized entryway to getting support for employment. But Medicaid waiver is another option. And for those of you that aren't familiar with what a Medicaid waiver is, at the federal level, there's a federal mandate to provide home and community-based services. This mandate has been around for a while, and it gives the state's direction on how to provide services to people to help make sure that they're getting the help they need in their homes and in their local community, as opposed to institutional care. So every state administers this mandate a little bit differently. But the guidance in the mandate does give the states the ability to use Medicaid as a funding mechanism for these services. The word waiver comes in where we are waiving the household income. So somebody with a disability who qualifies for Medicaid waiver service, as they're qualifying based on their income, not based on the family's income. So it's really based on a need with this overriding philosophy. If we help people and we provide support to them, they won't need more intensive institutional level care. So we're really about keeping people in the home and in the community. So where Medicaid waiver fits in is it provides a lot of really specific services. So in-home support, personal care. So somebody coming into your home to help your loved one with a lot of the things that you do, but also goal-oriented services. So I have somebody on a Medicaid waiver that gets a service where he's trying to learn how to drive. And so his in-home support person, his Medicaid waiver funded person, is coming in and helping him to prepare to take a driving test, right? Because that's good for him and that's going to increase his access in the community. Services such as community engagement, certainly residential support such as supported living, sponsored residential, day support programs. So there's a lot of services, and when people have a Medicaid waiver, they're getting those services generally at no cost. And the other bit, not only is that a big benefit, but a lot of the services I just described are only provided by Medicaid waiver providers. They're so specialized and regulated that they're not the kinds of services that generally you can find through your private, employer insurance plan, or to even pay privately. So a lot of times when families don't have a Medicaid waiver, they're not only losing the benefit of free services, but also just the services in general. It's a risk. It's not all the time. But if Medicaid waivers aren't on your radar and they're not something you've thought about, I just invite you to think about it tonight and consider it for you and your family. Essentially, waivers are solving that foreverness of disability. And I love that we just had a conversation about, well, maybe you have a disability, but you don't think that should define you. I think you'll find most of us would agree with that. That category disability just is that entryway into a lot of these services. And all of us, disability or not, expect to, improve in our situation over time. But often when we have a disability or disabling factor, that can cause us to need some level of support. Maybe a ton, maybe a little at first and a ton more later, who knows? But it's this idea that there's some level of support needed over the course of a lifetime. This information was taken from the My Life, My Community website, which is a Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Services here in Virginia website. So there are different waivers in our state. And as Carol mentioned, there are 3 waivers that can provide employment support. On this slide, I really am honing in, on these DD waivers that we're talking about. So again, the waivers what's available to you or how you qualify is going to be very specific to your needs. So I can't say which one to definitely go out and receive. It's about what you would qualify for, but it's also the waivers offer different kinds of support. So that's something to keep in mind. And if you're not from Virginia, every state administers their own Medicaid or Medicaid waiver program, and often they call it different things. So You might go to a state and it's not even, called that, and it can be a little bit harder to find. So that's just sort of a heads up if you're looking. So again, if you're thinking here that you don't need a waiver, I just, again, urge you to really think about that and think about the variety of services. So again, at this transition age, when our kids are students, they're home with us, right? So we're going to school, we're home. That caregiving is just embedded really naturally into the day to day. But as we enter adulthood, support may be needed. It might even just be case management, having somebody to go to try to access services and find out what's going on in the community. Maybe it's going out in the community with some coaching and guidance from somebody because you're working on social skills or other engagement skills. It could be, again, somebody coming into your home and helping you with daily living activities. Or, as I mentioned with one of my clients working on, a skill to help increase independence. So here in Virginia, our waiver system for the DD waiver is waitlisted. For the community living and family and individual supports waivers are waitlisted. So what that means is that we have so many slots in our state, they're all full. And so anyone applying for a waiver is going to have to wait considerable amount of time. We do have a prioritized system, which means when folks go in to apply for a waiver, they're going to be given a priority status, meaning, hey, it looks like you need this waiver now, so we're going to really prioritize you. Or you know what, you look like you're doing okay, we're going to keep you on our wait list, and let's keep looking at your needs over time to see when we need to give you a more urgent priority. That's why I say, since you don't know when you're going to get it, it's worth looking into because you're going to be sitting on a wait list for some amount of time anyway. So if it's appropriate for you, you're eligible, why not go ahead, apply, and see if you get that at the time that you actually need it. In order to apply for a waiver, you do need to go to your local community services board. So again, in some counties, they're called different things. Like I live in Powhatan, so I have the Powhatan and Goochland Community Services Board. We have Henrico, Chesterfield, and Richmond. It's the Richmond Behavioral Health Authority. So again, a lot of times with all this business that we're talking about tonight, the names of things can really trip people up and cause them to not look into it right away because it seems a little bit confusing or hard to understand. But you want to contact your community services board. Excuse me. Let them know you're applying for a waiver. You want to ask for a screening. And I say that because, these are all big institutions, right? When we talk about, Medicaid, Department of Developmental, Behavior and Developmental Services, these are kind of mammoth institutions with a lot of people, a lot of regulation. You never know who's answering the phone when you reach out. I've had folks call their community services board and just on the phone be told, hey, this doesn't apply to you. Your kid doesn't really need a waiver. You don't need to call. And so I really encourage you to ask to go through the eligibility process, ask for a screening, get through that phone call and get an appointment or get somebody to call you back or send you paperwork to get that process started. They're going to ask you to bring information to the appointment. And then if you are found eligible and you are assigned to the wait list with a priority status, you're going to want to be active though. Don't just sit there and wait. I've been on the wait list since my son was 5. And I'm, checking in with her, every other month. I'm just, hey, just letting you know, we got a med change, or we're starting to do this, or we had an IEP meeting. I want her to know my name and know who I am and know who my kiddo is. So we recommend taking an active role when you are on the wait list to stay engaged and stay involved. Waivers can provide supported employment services. So again, as Carol mentioned, if there is documentation that DARS is not going to continue to provide those services, that could be an avenue to get the Medicaid waiver to provide supported employment. And that could include things like job related, trying to understand what might be a good career or a good fit, doing some assessment, doing employment planning. And that's really about taking time to think about, what is my goal? Is it something I'd really like to do? Is it something I want to learn more about? Is it something I'd like to explore? And those kinds of considerations are important because anytime we're doing planning, discovery, or assessment, we're really explaining, we're kind of setting the direction of where we might go in terms of our job. And it's totally okay to change your mind. But just know that going through those processes of assessment, discovery, thinking through this can be really helpful to help someone hone in on what their job preferences might be. Sometimes Medicaid waiver in these situations could come in to provide some job development, could help connect somebody with an employer, even provide some on-the-job training. So that's none of this is ever a guarantee, right? You've heard me use the word eligibility quite a lot. So what we're really talking about is that these are systems that we're applying to. If we're applying to DARS or we're applying to our community service board to get a Medicaid waiver service, we're at that moment going through eligibility. I'm with someone on the other side deciding whether or not we meet the requirements for these services. So in that case too, we can't assume that we're going to automatically get job employment or job coaching or support. That's not primarily at all what a Medicaid waiver does. It's just something it can do if it's needed and other options have really been exhausted or finished. So I just say that to you because again, you're going to want to play an active part in advocating for your needs, asking, following through, and communicating to make sure you're getting what you need. Waivers can also, Medicaid waiver services can also, for example, if someone is self-employed, so an individual with a disability who's starting their own company, maybe making something and selling it or providing a service, that's also really kind of riding those lines with Medicaid waiver too, because those are personal goals, those are related to independence. So it's possible that that could fit into a Medicaid waiver service where, again, with my client that's learning how to drive, thinking also about what they're going to do in the community or job opportunities, or maybe collecting applications or thinking about, where they might want to spend their time as an employee could fit into a Medicaid waiver service. So those are things, again, if it's in line with the goals and the needs of that person, it is possible. Also consumer directed. So if we need to, hire our own supporter or potentially a coach or someone else, that might fit into those consumer directed services as well. So I really think it's about making sure that whatever you're needing to do in terms of a Medicaid waiver service is fitting into your goals and fitting into your assessment. So make sure to spend time on those kinds of things so that everything is really aligning. So the other bit too is that workplace support, for example. It could be, let's say, for example, if we have someone that needs to work, but they're needing some personal care during that work time, that is where potentially through Medicaid waiver, a personal care attendant or someone could be assigned to that individual to provide that personal care support while they're working. So that's something to think about. And again, working, whether it's their own job as someone who's self-employed or another kind of position. So that's another avenue where a Medicaid waiver might come in on the supported employment side. The other thing I just wanted to bring up, I'm switching here a little bit, is enable, because I know we're talking about DARS, we're talking about Medicaid waiver. I just also want to make sure you're aware that when you are working, that your wages from work can be direct deposited into an ABLE account. I have two slides here real quick that are from ABLE. So they're from the ABLE program itself. ABLE, the reason I'm bringing this up, let me take a step back. I get excited about this stuff. Sorry, so I kind of talk a little fast. is that in order to have a Medicaid waiver, one of the eligibility requirements is that you have less than $2,000 in resources, the person with the disability. Remember, we're waiving household income, so mom and dad might have more than $2,000. But if the individual with the disability has under $2,000, they are eligible, and the Medicaid waiver program won't consider the parent's income. But having only $2,000 can, to your name, is tough. It's hard to live, hard to get your needs met, things like that. So ABLE stands for Achieving a Better Life Experience, and it's a program that is set up to establish a way for people who are receiving public benefits or people who with disabilities to save funds. And those, the money in the savings account up to $100,000 does not count against that resource limit that Medicaid has in place. So that's why I wanted to bring this up to say if you are considering the Medicaid waiver and those kinds of supports are important to you, you're going to have this issue with the resource limit. And an ABLE account is a place where you could be directly depositing paychecks and saving money. And as long as you use that money to pay for qualified disability expense, it's okay. And a qualified disability expense is kind of general. If it's, hey, I need to, go to the store and pick up particular things that make me feel comfortable. If it's, hey, my iPad broke and I've got to get a new one. If it's, this therapy isn't covered by my insurance, so I'm going to use my ABLE account to pay for it. Anything that's related to, again, achieving a better life experience. So I wanted to make sure you all knew about this because as you're entering employment, it can be a really good idea to also think about opening an ABLE account. And so that abletoday.org website is down there at the bottom. It's certainly worth visiting and finding out more if that's something that could help you with your independence as you continue. So I know I just went through that in a whirlwind, and I'm sorry, I'm not trying to sell my services. I should have taken off the prices here, but I did just want to let y'all know we do have a learning lab. So if ever you're thinking, hey, I want to make sure I get information. It's just chocked full of videos and worksheets and templates and all kinds of good stuff. So we give talks all the time. And we wanted to just make sure we created sort of a hub of resources. So if that's of interest to you, I do have the QR code here if that's something anyone has questions about. This is my email address if anyone has questions and wants to reach out to me directly. And Holly, I went kind of fast there, but I'm happy to answer questions if folks have any.
That was fantastic.
Oh,
I learn
good.
something every time I see this presentation, and I'm actually considering joining your learning hub as well because
Oh,
it
cool.
just doesn't matter how many years you do this. This is constantly evolving, and there's just so much to learn, and you just have to stay on top of it all the time. So we've had fabulous engagement from all of our live participants. Thank you all for being so plugged in. And I know those who are streaming this later will appreciate that these questions have been asked. Let's see. I think this one was addressed. We talked about, there's a question, is Medicaid different from the DD waitlist? So the Medicaid is the overall organization waiver. I think you explained it better than I could summarize, but DD is
Sure.
for one type of waiver, and it's actually an outdated name.
Yes,
Thank you for
and I'm
dropping
trying
this
to
up
find
front.
that question. Oh, is this Medicaid different from the DD wait list? No. So Medicaid
Right.
waiver and the developmental disability wait list, we're talking about the same thing. So when I say Medicaid waiver, I categorize it that way because there actually are a lot of different waivers.
Mhm.
But we have a history here in Virginia of saying DD waiver. And we used to say things like ID waiver that, we're not really using anymore. So yes, developmental disability by and large is included within what I'm calling the Medicaid waiver.
Great. And that's so important because we talk about these things conversationally with acronyms, and sometimes
Yes.
the acronyms are outdated and you Google it and it's hard to find. So thank you for breaking that down for us because that can make it difficult to navigate.
Sure.
This next question is a great one, and I'm glad this person asked it because we get this, we deal with this all the time. So the services are based on the income of the adult with the need, not based on the income of the family or parents of the adults in need.
Yes. So that's what's so important. That's really what that word waiver means is that so if you were just going to go out today and get plain Medicaid, which is health insurance, if that's what you were going to apply for, they would be looking at your household income primarily. Generally, there are some if this, that, ors, but just in general, they're going to look at your household income. So in order to get these Medicaid waiver services, really specific services, they waive the household income and they only consider the person with the disability, which could be a child. So that can be a child and an adult because they're really saying the the conception, conceptually, they're really saying, hey, if we help you, Kathy, with your disability and we do things for you, you're not going to need as much help. You're not going to have to go to an institution and receive really expensive care. So we're going to go ahead and waive the fact that your household has income and approve you for Medicaid and Medicaid waiver. So that's what that word waiver means. But that is important because you may meet someone who has Medicaid, but they don't have Medicaid waiver services. And so they have to cross that stream, and that community services board needs to know we're trying to make sure they also access those waiver services and then vice versa. So, but yeah, I too, Holly, have families that'll say, oh, we'll never qualify because we have means or we have enough money or we're not under $2,000 a month, but actually this is very deliberately made it so more people do qualify for these services. So I think it is an important point. There are times when I've had this happen where I've met someone who said, "Oh, well, we're leaving a $75,000 life insurance policy to our son. He'll be fine." And that is a lot of money. That's a lot of money. I would, that's great. That's a great idea for an inheritance or funds. But the problem is the services I'm describing, in-home support, community engagement, residential services such as supported or sponsored residential, you're talking about thousands of dollars a month. And so you're going to run through that 75,000 in no time. So it's important to really think about the cost of those services. And again, in that learning lab, and I'm not here to like push or sell, that's like, ugh. But I'm just telling you that we do have a cost calculator in there. So it can help to go through and figure out, well, what does it cost to take care of my loved one? And then that's how much money I need to make sure I'm leaving behind for them.
I think that's a really beneficial tool. And again, what you're talking about, people planning for their estates, that's where special needs trusts can come into play. And our speaker during December talks a little bit about those. So when we're talking about long-term financial planning, we get a little bit more down in the weeds. It's a lot to process. That's why we spend 6 nights going through and we barely, scratch the surface, but at least we can send people in the direction so they can pursue the services and know which questions to ask as they're figuring all of these things out for themselves. Another great question, can anyone with a disability get a Medicaid waiver? Or is it focused on certain categories or degrees of disabling conditions?
Sure. They're going to do a VIDES assessment, usually during a waiver intake process, amongst other things. And again, it kind of depends on what you're applying for exactly, your age, and a few other factors. But I don't want to say disabled enough or more disabled or smidgy disabled. It's really going to depend on that initial assessment as well as the information that you bring to them. This is where we have to really be an advocate, and help our loved one and help make sure people see the concerns we have. And it might be at the end of it, they say, you know what, you're not eligible. But what other supports and services could we get? But really there is an assessment and there is a process to go through to get a fair assessment to make sure somebody's really looking at all of the needs of your loved one before they're yes or noing you.
And I think a a simple, this might be a little bit basic, but a simple way to express it is it's true that waivers are not for everyone. So
Yes.
there are plenty of Americans going around out there living their lives who are living with some form of a disability who are not going to be candidates for a waiver. Um, Again, the way you described what you're waiving, I think helps explain that. As this is a person who, without these supported services, may wind up needing a caretaker or some form of an institution to care for them. So that's different from the broader, more diverse group of folks who have disabilities and who are engaged in the community in all kinds of different ways. So it is a subset.
Mhm.
There's a question, what waiver can help with supported employment? So supported employment specifically is a term that's going to be more directly associated with DARS, with the type of employment services that they receive. And where waiver comes into play is if a person is working and because of the way their disability manifests is maybe not going to become stable in employment over time. And this reminds me, let's define the term stable. This is a jargon word. We're not talking about, mental stability or physical stability, any of that. Within this field, we don't talk about being independent at work because the philosophy is no one's truly independent at work. We all have supports and need training and colleagues and all kinds of things that make us successful at work. So we don't talk about being independent at work. Instead, we use the word stable. So that's just a field specific little piece of jargon to know that that's what we're talking about when we say stable at work. It means that instead of relying on some sort of outside service to keep you engaged and successful at work, you are using the resources that are available through your actual place of employment. If you need supports over and above that employment specialist who may do that, that's where those waiver services would come into play.
Mhm.
And if you could briefly summarize those again, I know you talked about someone getting personal care at work.
Yeah. So like you said, needing more support at work after DARS has already been engaged. There's also been instances where someone needed personal care while working. So maybe someone to assist them for, toileting assistance or, with meals or just any other sort of personal care, something that keeps me healthy and well while I'm here. And then there have also been situations where Medicaid waiver, by way of your services and your goals through your service plan. So now we got a new one, ISP, Individualized Service Plan. Through your service plan, through your waiver, it might be determined that you want to think about your employment goals and your employment interest and things like that. So that's where Medicaid waiver, you might have a goal toward that. Also, if you're thinking about self-employment, hey, I'm going to open up, my own business. And so maybe Medicaid waiver supports might be involved in assisting you with that process, and assisting you, with your goals to better understand or be as independent in running that business as possible. So there's a lot of different ways. Nothing is 100%, click on this and you're going to get it. This is really about advocating, making sure that the case manager for your Medicaid waiver service and DARS, if you're also working with DARS, understands what your needs are, that those needs are documented and have been explored, and then that's translating into services through your Medicaid waiver.
Fantastic. Great question. Do you have to wait to get a job to get an ABLE account?
No, 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 no. You can do an ABLE account. ABLE is a 529A. And so 529s are college savings programs. And so ABLE is, a version of that. So you can start it up. The only difference really, not only, some of the differences between your 529 and your ABLE is that you can only have one ABLE. You do have to be disabled, and your disability right now has to have occurred before age 26. Next year, it'll be up to 46 because we're really missing out on folks that get diagnosed later, or those that might have traumatic brain injury or other things that come up in life and result in disability. So that is changing next year, but right now it's until 26. So, but it's a great tool.
And let me ask you a clarifying question because I don't know the answer to this one.
Okay.
So we said you have to be disabled in order to have an ABLE account, but we also just talked about different subsets of who qualifies for what as a person with disability, right? So
Yeah.
we've got what you qualify for in school by IDEA, and then that changes when you go in the workforce under ADA and under the Rehabilitation Act. And then we've got a smaller subset for Medicaid waiver. So what are we talking about when we say you have to have a disability to get an ABLE account?
Yeah, that's great. It's very similar to DARS. It just has to be documented. So whether that's a medical professional or your school, it just has to be documented.
So a broad group of people
Yes.
can
Yes.
use an ABLE account. Great.
Yeah.
Let's see. Ooh, this is a good one. And I think I know where this question is coming from. Do I need to apply for Medicaid when my student is 18? So I think here we're differentiating between applying for Medicaid versus applying for Medicaid waiver. So we were talking about we want to get on that, especially in Virginia, we want to apply for the Medicaid waiver early because of the wait list. I'm going to guess this person is talking about possibly applying for Social Security, which we have to reapply for, whether we've gotten it as a child or not. We have to reapply for when the student turns 18. And am I correct? If you are designated as a person who will receive one form of Social Security, you would also then be eligible for Medicaid as a health insurance service. Is that correct?
Yes, eligible. Still have to apply, but eligible. Yes.
Okay.
So
I think that's what that person is talking about because she's got her checklist and
okay.
she's doing great. She's on top of it.
That's great.
That's what we're talking
everything. And I appreciate the question about 18 because there is a lot we have to consider that does change with all of these services. At 18, they're on their own record. So we can still, that household income applies because Medicaid, if you have applied for it, they're asking you, who lives in your house? What do they do? Where do they work? What's going on? So, just so but at 18, we're really going on our own record, but we could still waive household income for waiver service.
Fantastic.
It's
All
so
right,
hard to maneuver.
Carol, we've got some that we may need you to address too. So if you are available to hop back on, that would be great. Love all these questions. We're really getting into a deeper dive. There's been a question about what are the financial benefits to employers who are hiring those with disabilities?
There is the work opportunity tax credit that they can get if the person has disclosed they have a disability. We have a training program that our business development team does called Windmills. It's not our program, it's nationwide. But they approach employers because there's plenty of other benefits that might end up being financial. I wish I had studies in front of me. Like there's typically less turnover when you're hiring people with disabilities. And I forget everything else. But yes, there is that tax credit they can get.
I can share some of those as well. And if anyone has more specific interest in this, we have a couple of great resources that I often share with our business partners, and I'd be happy to email to you all. One of the things that we always hear back from our partners is that morale is incredibly enriched by having this kind of program. And that people, especially with the return from COVID, people who did not want to come back into the office to work always want to come back when they're working with our students because it really enriches their work life. The other thing that I will, if I can bear witness, is one of the things that we do as Northstar is we go in and do trainings about how to be an inclusive employer. And more often than not in that training, someone from that workplace will disclose for the first time that they have a disability. And this scene has played out over and over again where a colleague turns to them and said, I had no idea you were living with X or Y or Z. But when an employer opens their doors and overtly states that this kind of inclusion is important to them, suddenly people don't feel the need to mask as much. And then they can be open about what their needs are. And what we know from Universal Design for Employment is when we have an inclusive workplace, everyone benefits, not just someone who is designated as a person with disability by whatever law. We just listed all the different ways that can happen. So there are a lot of benefits. The specific tax code for sure. For federal contractors, there's also the Disability One contracts. Those are still happening, yes? Or are those being revised? Yeah.
The Ability One contracts?
Yes.
Yes, they're still
Yes. But then also there are all these other benefits that have proven time and time again. Thank you all so much for your participation and your fabulous questions. I appreciate everyone. We look forward to having folks join us for next month's presentation about promoting independence and long-term financial planning and decision-making. Thank you again, and we look forward to having you back shortly.
All right, thank you.